Dear learners, welcome back to your educational channel Learn and Educate, where we were studying about the Income Tax Act and the various provisions as incorporated by the Income Tax Act 1961 in India. In this video, we would be studying about the definition, the meaning of the short-term capital asset as per section 2, clause 42A. Short-term capital asset. Short-term capital asset means a capital asset which has been held by the SSE for which for not more than 36 months immediately preceding the date of transfer. In the case when an assessee holds an asset which is a capital asset, and that asset has been held for a period of 36 months or more. Up till what time? The time till which that asset has been transferred. Before that, the holding period of that asset. This section specifically tells about the holding period of that particular asset when an asset has been kept by the assessee with him, and that is capital asset. A capital asset means any property which is held by the assessee, whether that asset is connected with his business or profession, it is not applicable. When any security which is held by the foreign institutional investors and which has been invested in such securities in accordance with the regulations mentioned by the Securities and Exchange Board of India, that is a capital asset. The asset which has been linked, the asset which is not stock in trade, the asset which are not the belonging to the personal effects, they are the capital asset. And one such assets are been held by the SSE for a period of less than 36 months, immediately before the date of its transfer, is short-term capital assets. The short-term capital asset depends upon the two criteria: which type of asset is there and what is the holding period, the time till which, the months till which that asset is held by the assessee before the date of its transfer. In this scenario, the few type of assets are: first, the listed equity shares. The listed equity shares, in the case of which securities transaction tax has been paid, the listed shares which are listed on the recognized stock exchanges in India and where the securities transaction tax STT has been paid. For that type of asset, the holding period is 12 months or less. When the listed equity shares on which security transaction tax is paid, when the asset has been held for 12 months and less than 12 months, then that equity shares will be under under the definition of short-term capital asset. Otherwise, it would become a long-term capital asset. Units second is units of equity-oriented mutual funds. When the units of the equity-oriented mutual fund, wherein the equity-oriented mutual funds, the portfolio 65 percentage amount is invested in the equity share instruments, that type of equity oriented mutual funds and its units are held by the SSE for a period of 12 months and less than 12 months, then it is a short term capital asset. The third one is the units of business trust, that is units of real estate investment trust and units of infrastructure investment trust. Those units are held by the SSE for a period of 12 months or less than 12 months, then these units would fall under the definition of short term capital asset. Units of Unit Trust of India and date oriented mutual fund, in this case, the period would be 36 months or less, which means that for a period of 36 months or less than 36 months, that is 35, 33, anyone for which held by the SEC, it would fall under the category definition of a short-term capital asset. Immovable property, that is land and building, when such property has been held by the SEC for 24 months or less than 24 months, then it would be classified under the definition of short-term capital asset. Unlisted shares, when the shares which are not listed on any stock exchange recognized stock exchange in India, then that shares which is held by the SSE for 24 months or less will be a short-term capital asset. Other asset like gold and bonds, gold, bonds, etc. when held by the SSE for 36 months or less, it would be categorized under the definition of short-term capital asset. And when any period exceeding this months has been held by the SSE, then that asset would fall under the category of long-term capital asset. But otherwise, when in the previous video we have studied about the long-term capital asset, wherein the long-term capital asset, the definition pertains to, the definition means that when an asset which is not been a short-term capital asset, other than that it would be a long-term capital asset. Therefore, the long-term capital asset as defined by section 2 clause 29A states that a long-term capital asset means a capital asset which is not a short-term capital asset. Therefore, thus the capital asset which is held by the SSE for more than 36 months, which is immediately preceding the date of its transfer, is a long-term capital asset. But otherwise, as per section 2 clause 42A, which means that a short-term capital asset means a capital asset which is held by an assessee for not more than 36 months immediately preceding the date of its transfer.